are both going to be recording that information, and then we'll total it up, and we'll be able to say, for example, candidate number 1 has appeared, one time, candidate number 2 has appeared, was named by you 4 or 5 times, whatever the case is, and then we'll be able to see where the numbering lies, and then talk about some of those people that are needing to be discussed further. So my preference is to proceed that way. So I would like to commence with that, if that is okay with the council.
Yeah, that is okay with myself, and I'm sure the council is okay with that as well. One thing that is really important, and you and I talked about this prior to the meeting, is that all the information in this document is privileged information, only available to the council, not to anybody else outside of here. So all the names, all the information, it's strictly confidential under, what did you say it was, under Minnesota State statute or?
Yeah. Minnesota Data Practices Statute. Now, there will be, again, there is some information that ultimately can be released to the public.
Correct.
On those people that were selected by you to be
Correct.
interviewed.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, we'll start with the Mayor Pro Tem, and he can name his top 3 candidates. And we'll go
Okay.
to my right to left.
Okay.
Well, out of the 9, I could only choose 2, 4 and 6.
Okay.
I have 7, 4, and 6.
Okay.
4 and 5.
So you only have 2 as well? Okay. Okay.
Six, 7, and 4.
Okay.
4, 5, and 6.
I will say that Councilman Johnson sent me his via email, and his were 4, 6, and 8.
Mine is 1, 6, and 7.
What was your first number, Rick?
1.
1. Okay. Mayor?
5, 6, 9.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do then is just take a minute here and total these up, and we'll see where I mean, obviously you've heard some patterns here, but I just want to go through these, and then we'll go through each candidate and say how many times they appeared. Kevin's already totaling this, so I'm going to do the same. You ready to compare notes, Kevin? Let's just, so he and I will just go through this first and see if our totals are the same. Candidate number 1?
1,
Yep. 2?
0,
3?
0,
4?
6,
Yep. 5?
3,
Yes. 6?
7,
Yes. 7?
3,
Yes. 8?
1,
9?
1.
Okay, so our numbers match, so either we're both wrong or we're both right. So what you see there then, candidate number 4, candidate number 6. So candidate number 6 appears 7 times. Candidate number 4 appears 6 times. And then what you have are 2 candidates that have been listed 3 times. That would be candidate 5 and candidate 7. And then there are 3 that were named once. So you have a fairly clear top 2, a fairly clear second 2, and then it drops off considerably from there, with only the remainder of the people have either been listed once or 0 times.
Would it be appropriate then to say that we have discussions surrounding candidates 4, 5, 6, and 7, and remove the others from consideration?
That would be, that's up to you, but you certainly could. I mean, though the others have only appeared 1 or 0 times. That would be a logical step if you're all comfortable with that.
Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, again, 6 and 4 seem to be pretty much a consensus, almost consensus. And then you have 5 and 7. You certainly could say, let's interview those 4. Or you could talk about,
Well, I
talk
think
about each of
I
them.
think we should talk about it. I think we should talk specifically about candidates 5 and 6 first, to just see, I'm sorry.
5 and 7.
5 and 7 first, to just see if we want to continue down the process with those 2 candidates, or do we want to have a conversation about all 4 equally? There's a definite line there. It's not like we're 6, 7, and 5. It goes on to 3. There's a definite demarcation line there. So what would council like to do? Councilmember Nelson?
Can we just have a conversation about 6 and 4? Since they are the top 2, leaving those, and then discuss the other 2, or? I'm not sure.
Well, the question that I would pose to you is, do you need to talk about 6 and 4 since they were listed 7 and 6 times? You certainly can talk about their merits, but if you don't interview those 2, I don't know who you will interview. So, my feeling would be to talk about the ones where you're on the fence. But it's up to you. If you wish to talk about all of them, I would start with, 6 and 4 then, but.
Councilmember Anderson?
I think if we could somehow by consensus eliminate a couple, namely 5 and 7, but there are obviously some people that feel strongly about those. So I think maybe the thing to do would be to talk about the 2 that are kind of outliers and see if we can agree that they should be in or they should be out. It's surprising to me that we've got, pretty strong feelings on 2 of them, and then the others fall quite a bit below that. But I think we should hear, before we eliminate, we should hear why people think 5 and 7 would be good candidates. And so go from there. That's what I would suggest, but I don't know what everybody else wants to do.
That's kind of the thought process that I had as well, is to determine whether or not we were going to have those 2 remain, and then I think we talk about the process in its totality. So Councilmember Nelson?
Just a question, do we want to have a conversation about how many we want to interview? If we only do 2 and we lose 1, what do we do? I'm just curious. I don't have a strong opinion about it. I just wonder if we want to set how many do we want to go to the next step with?
Yes, Council, do you have an opinion on that?
I do.
Gary?
I recommend that you be at 3 minimum, for the very reason that Councilmember Nelson mentioned. If you had 2 and 1 dropped out, would you still move forward with only 1 candidate in the process? So my recommendation is 3 or more for that reason.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only picked 2 out of the 9 that I felt comfortable with. If I had to choose between 5 and 7, it would be 7. I don't know if that weighs on anything, but it's just
To eliminate or to keep? Which way do you mean?
to keep. I would, 7 is more palatable to me, I guess you would say, but, and a reminder that interviewing even these three, you know, if we don't have to choose one of those three, it could be, go back to the drawing board, but that would be mine, and Mr. Ahmed didn't, you only selected 2 also, so maybe you could weigh in on 5 or 7.
It was tough choosing, too.
I'm in the same position you guys are. I mean, I selected 3 because I was told to select 3 names, or 3 numbers, so that's what I did. It was not easy for me to select 3 names to bring forward. What I seen was not what I expected. But I don't want us to get ahead of the game. I would not at all be comfortable with going in with less than 3 candidates. If we move what Councilmember Christensen is stating, that then puts candidate 7 at 4, which is still a step away from candidate 5 or 6. When you, I'm sorry, 4 or 6. Councilmember Anderson.
I will share that I originally had number 5 pretty high, but the more I looked into it, I have reservations. So it was not one of my top 3, so I can't suggest that we strike him, but he was in my top 3 until I did some further investigating, and I don't think that would be a good fit. And I think that's what Councilmember Christensen is saying. Don't put words in your mouth.
Councilmember Nelson.
So let's just talk about process here. So if we select these 3, you know, I'm hearing reservations from more than one person, so what is our agreement? If we're not happy with these, you go back to the drawing board, or where are we at with, I mean, what did we agree to with you?
Well, there's always reservations at this point in the process, so, you know, my advice is trust the process. If you get to the end of the process and you have reservations, you have concerns, you have doubts, that's when it's time to talk about next steps. And I will be with you until this process is done.
Okay.
So whenever that comes. But, you know, again, it's natural to have reservations at this point. Until you see more information on people, until you see them, there's always reservations. So, yep.
You answered my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
I am seeing some consensus with moving and beginning the discussion process with candidates 4, 6, and 7, and eliminating 5. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah.
Councilman Rahman?
I'll go along with the process. I just looked at experience, and I understand that there were some things in there on number 5 that, as far as retirement issue, but I looked at more at experience more than anything else. I don't know if we can't get personal on issues or not. I thought candidate number 5. I didn't like any of them. In fact, I was quite surprised to see that the ones that were brought to us with the things that I've researched were even why they weren't screened by. I don't know.
Let's try to keep the process at trying to select. I will just also state that number 5 was one of my candidates, and I think I'm willing to say that for the discussion process to move us forward, that we would eliminate number 5. But if there's strong opposition from Councilmember Ahmed, I think we need to have more conversation about that Otherwise, we would be to the point where we're talking
No,
council.
no, I'll go along with the majority.
Okay, so then we're talking about candidate number 4, candidate number 6, and candidate number 7. Is there consensus that those are the 3 that we will discuss at this point and get clarification from Gary as needed on those candidates? Do we have consensus with that?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you suggested a minimum of 3. Is there, what's the downside of just doing 2? Is it, just a question.
If one drops, you only have one left then to interview, so that's the, that's the primary downside.
Gotcha.
Yep,
Didn't even think about it.
yeah.
I think we should move ahead with
Okay, the 3.
4, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
Gary, could you give us a, just, I'm sorry, I think I heard something when I started talking. Could you repeat what you just said? Because I was going to ask for a brief recommendation or a brief overview from his interview process on those 3 candidates, so we'd have more information. But if you're ready to go to decision, I would rather have us talk a little bit about what his feelings were.
Go ahead. I think that's right.
Gary, could you give us just a brief synopsis on candidate 4, 6, and 7, in just the highlights and how you think, based on your interviews and where you're at in this process, how you think these individuals would fit in with us?
Well, first of all, I don't, in my part of the interview process, I don't rank them.
Correct.
So, and ultimately, I think fit is your call, you know, not mine. My initial screening of people is based on experience, background, education, that stuff. And then the interview that I conduct is, you know, is a way to give you additional information. So I mean, I can give you a summary of people's experience if you want, but I don't have feelings about people at this point in the process.
Well, I think we've all read multiple times the process.
Right, the
So-
information, yeah.
Okay, so I guess where I'm at with it is it's up to council at this point. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you maybe explain what criteria you used to go from 22 to 11? What, you know, we didn't see those. So-
Yep.
So what did you use to get us to this point?
Well, education, so bachelor's degree obviously was a minimum, some have masters, that adds up more. Experience, similar experience in other places, you know, size of the community, duration of time in the community, those kind of factors. The writing sample is looked at and evaluated as well. And then ultimately, though, I don't draw a magic number. I say, okay, where should the line be drawn? In this case, it was 11. I'll tell you the other 11, you know, the vast majority of them probably didn't even meet the minimum qualifications for the position. There's always some of that comes in any position. But it was really based on experience, background, education, and similar community experiences.
Okay, good, thanks.
What doesn't come into play at this point in the process that will for you is sort of other variables, because there are other variables that will come up when background checking is done in more detail. That's when those things will come out more. Should I talk a little bit about next steps? Would that be helpful for you, or?
Well, I think where we're at right now is I need consensus that we want to move forward with 4, 6, and 7. I've kind of seen it, but I want to make sure that that's where we're at, and then go to next steps. Are we okay with that? Or are we saying by consensus agreeing that those are the 3, that's where we're going to go?
I think that's what we need to do, move forward to those 3.
I do too.
And a motion is not needed for this.
If you have
It's
any doubt, a
favorable.
motion would be advisable, but if you're confident that you have consensus, I think that's sufficient.
I'm confident we have consensus.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead with next process,
Okay.
next steps. Man,
All right,
this
sounds
was-
good.
this
So
was quick.
immediately, I will start doing additional background checking on people, criminal history, civil history, verification of education, verification of employment history, all of those kind of nuts and bolts details will be gathered for you. Motor vehicle reports, credit history, all of that information will be gathered on each of these people. I will personally do reference checking on them, talking with current and former employers, gathering information for you that way. Each person will be asked to complete a personality index, and then all of that information will be compiled. You'll get another binder like this approximately a week before the final interview, and then you'll have a chance to review all that information and then come in for the interview process. So that's what I will be doing between now and the interview process. I would like to, so I could take any questions on that and then talk about that actual interview process is another thing we need to talk through tonight to see which components you would like to include in the interview process, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, what are the things that you want to include, so.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we still on target for interviewing the 12th and 13th of November?
From my perspective, yes.
Okay. Is there any way to do it sooner?
Couple of issues with that. One is the background check process can take up to a couple of weeks, and I'd like to have the information in your hands a week before the interview. So that gets pretty tight to move it up another week before that. I think theoretically it's possible, but the biggest issue is the information gathering that's needed to occur.
And I think we all blocked off on our calendars the 12th and 13th, and so people are probably planning around that, so certainly wouldn't want it to be delayed.
Right.
The other thing is that the election is on the 10th, so we'll know who the candidate is. It won't be through the Board of Canvass yet, but
Okay.
I would think we could get it done in 1 day, though.
Well, we have to talk about process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nelson.
Just was curious, will you be updating us as you go through your process if you run into any issues or those types of things, or, I mean,
Something major, yes. I think just the standard information gathering, I wouldn't be providing updates on unless that's something you feel strongly you would want in pieces. But generally, I wouldn't do that unless there was a significant thing that emerged.
okay.
Okay, well then, let's go on to your discussion of possible expenses reimbursement for the candidates.
Okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. There's no right or wrong answer to this one. What I have seen communities do with this question, it always comes up, and as soon as I talk to these three people, if any of them are traveling a distance, they're going to say, is there any reimbursement for, my mileage to come there, for a hotel room, for, depending on how long the interviews are. If it's 1 day, typically people would probably come in the night before, stay locally. So that's a question for you to answer. If you wish to do something like that, what I encourage you to do is cap it. Don't just have some unlimited number of, just to say, we'll say $300 that they can have if they turn in expenses for hotel, for meals, that sort of thing, up to $300, for example. Or some communities just say, no, we're not going to do anything. And there isn't a right or a wrong answer. It's about 50-50 where each comes down. I just need to know how you would like to handle that, because I'm sure it will come up.
Yeah, and I mean, we have one that will be traveling a distance, the way it appears. Well, not a distance, I guess, but farther than the others.
Right.
Councilmember, I don't know who was first.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
Councilmember Anderson.
No, I kind of like the idea of limiting it, no more than, you turn in the expenses. I like that idea. With the candidates that we have, it's all going to probably be mileage and maybe one hotel with some meals. I think that's fair.
Would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
I would just ask, is 300 a reasonable, I mean, do you see that?
I do. I've seen up to 5, depending if you're leaning toward a one-day interview, usually that's just a one-night stay, $100 a night, a few other expenses, 300 seems reasonable to me.
And then I will. I'll make the motion that we reimburse up to $300 for travel-related expenses with receipts. Now, we won't get receipts on mileage, but, so I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to reimburse the expenses of up to $300 per candidate. Discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Fagerly,
What is it, 56 cents a mile or 57?
56.9.
Whatever your rate is what I usually go, whatever you
It's
use.
the IRS rate is what
Yeah.
we use, correct?
Yeah.
56.9, correct? Councilmember Nelson.
I was just wondering.
Am I asleep at the switch today or what?
No. Just wondering if you were doing calculation on mileage, whether somebody's coming that distance, if there's room for a hotel and,
Well, there wouldn't be room for a hotel for probably one of them.
yeah.
But I think it's fair. I mean, we got one
I'm
number,
fine.
that's what it
I'm fine. I just was wondering if Councilmember Fagerly was calculating in his head.
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, interview dates are the 12th and 13th. I think we've all got those blocked off on our calendars right now, but do we need to wait until we hear a little bit more on what the process is going to be to see if it's going to be one day or two? Or where are we at as a council? I almost think we need to get to the components next before we can decide if it's going to be a one-day or two-day. I mean, interviewing 3 candidates, we certainly should be able to accomplish that in a one-day process. Councilmember Plowman.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it should be relatively simple. However, I think the fact that we have 2 days booked off, it buys us a little bit of time just in case. Say we're easily able to eliminate one, and then there's 2 individuals that were just really on the fence, or say there's a debate that surrounds that. Now we have extra buffer zone, rather than if we change it to just one day, and then we find out later, we wish we had that second day.
Good point. Councilmember Anderson, followed by Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we need to decide if we're going to make a decision. And all I can relate to is last time, we had it set up that we were going to narrow, I think we probably interviewed 4 or 5 then. And then we were going to have second interviews on another day, but we didn't exercise that option. So as long as we're comfortable with making a decision based on 1 days of interview, I think that's the direction we should go. And having a day in reserve in case somebody gets sick or, I don't know what could happen. But I think we need to be comfortable with doing it in 1 day, 1 interview.
Well, I'm not there at this point. Councilmember Nelson.
I think we should plan for a day and a half so that these people can come to town and experience the community, have a little time, and not just be back to back to back to back. Because I do think it's important that they have some time to interact with the community, the council, with some employees, and have some of that kind of time. So I guess finishing up on the next day or something might be a good way to allow people to sleep on it and also to experience Wilmer.
Okay. I guess that's where I'm at too, I'm sorry, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if that's necessary at this point or not. We need to do the interviews first and see where we're at. and then decide if we're going to do what you're all talking about. That's how I feel. You might be stepping out of bounds by bringing them around the community, and then let's see what we decide after the interviews first. That's my thought.
Well, but I think if we're bringing them in for an interview, I mean, they're learning the community, learning what they're coming into. We do the interview, and then where I was going with this is that I think we need to have a second interview, and it may be just with the finalist.
I totally agree. I agree we need 2 interviews.
Okay.
I think we've learned
Well, I think that's good process.
good policy, good process.
Okay. Are we ready to go to the possible interview components? So the first would be discussion as to individual interviews with each council member. Anybody have an opinion on that? And I mean, these are just ideas that Gary brought to us. Doesn't necessarily mean this is what we need to do.
I don't think it's necessary, personally. I mean,
Councilmember Addison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I think that there's potential pitfalls with that I would just as soon see us avoid. So I think the group interview, you know, I've done it a number of different situations. It works. I think that's effective.
Okay. Councilmember Nelson?
If we're setting it up that the finalist is going to have a separate interview, I don't think that having separate interviews with separate council members, I would be worried about maintaining the right questions and those types of things. So I'm in favor of a group interview. And I think it might be important that we're saying this is going to be a 2-step process too.
Mr. Weirs?
Well, I'd like to comment about doing 2 interviews. You know, I'm thinking that through and thinking if you settle on one person, you're going to have a lot of background information depending on the other interview components that you're talking about. You're going to have all that too. I question the purpose of the second, where you bring that single person back for another interview, just that one. But, I mean, you're welcome to do that. That would be fairly atypical, I think, for this type of process. But I would look for some input from you on, is that a same type of interview, structured, unstructured? You know, we can kind of work that through. So, and I would, if you're going to do that, I would encourage you to do that on that second day, rather than trying to schedule somebody else to come back, because that could get, I mean, you could be several weeks out before you line calendars up again. So if you're going to bring one person back for a second interview, I would encourage you to do it do the main interviews on the first day and then come back to second. That way it's on the calendars already.
Councilmember Anderson?
I think we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to make sure we get it right. So if we want to do the second interview, I think what we would need to do collectively is decide on the first day, this is our person that we want to interview again tomorrow morning. As somebody's already said, sleep on it and then interview that person again. I'm not sure if we're going to have different questions, or I'm not sure what we actually do that day, but I know that the council is very sensitive and concerned with getting it right. So I can be appreciative of that, but we need to figure out what we're going to ask differently than we've already asked.
Councilmember Plowman, followed by Nelson.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're all going to be really trying to pay attention to detail and be as thorough as we can possibly be. My thought is I'm just thinking if there's not a candidate that really sticks out to us, that jumps out as the overwhelming front runner, I don't necessarily think then another round of interviews after that is going to change that. I think we'll know that right off the bat. And so then it just becomes a question of if we do bring them back, are we just beating a dead horse with some of the same questions? And then, are we kind of duplicating effort and becoming inefficient? I feel strongly that when you have the right candidate speaks to you, and usually they can speak to the group. And so I think after that first round, we'll likely feel one way or another. And if we don't feel strongly about a candidate, I think then we got to go a different direction, but not the direction of more interviews.
Okay. Councilmember Nelson?
I'm okay with that. I do feel very strongly that the interaction that the candidates have in a community forum or with people is very important. With that, and if we set it up to do one day and with the possibility of a second one, or if we're going to do it all at one time, then I think we do need to schedule something for the community. That may help us to make our decision with what we see and what we observe. And if we need to do a second interview, I guess I'd like to see us keep the doors open to get this done. But I do think it's important that we allow for community interaction.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Maybe I could talk about, that's a great point about community input. Let me throw a couple of ideas at you regarding that component of the process. It might help you, and then, because we're kind of starting at the end, figuring we should do 2 days instead of one, and maybe I can talk through the community component and then talk through a sample day to show you what can be accomplished in a single day. So first of all, on the community input, there's really two distinct ways to do that. Well, there's more than two, but two ways that I've done it that I think has been effective. One is to have a community forum, like an open house type function. It's in the late afternoon, 5 o'clock, whatever, after work. People can come in, meet the candidates in a very casual way. So that's one way to do it. What I've seen with that is they're lightly attended. But that doesn't mean they'd be lightly attended here. So that's option one. The second that recently I did, and people were really pleased with it, was to have a community panel conduct an actual interview of each of the candidates and rate answers to questions, a very formal participation in the process. And the way that group handled it was it was a smaller group, it was a group of 5. They each member of the elected body appointed two people. In your case, I think you'd have to just appoint one, because otherwise the group would be too big. But that's another thing to consider, and that could be easily, that actual interview could easily be included in a single-day interview process, because, well, I can explain that later. But those are kind of two schools of thought regarding community participation. And I guess you could do both if you wanted to as well, have an open house type thing and have a panel of community members participate. But so 2 things to think about.
Councilmember Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My idea of the second interview is not necessarily if we had a finalist the first day. Mine is, I'm suspecting there'll probably be 2 of them. And you'll want a second interview. And I agree, it's good to sleep on it. To make your decision, after you interviewed 3 people during the course of one day, and then you're trying to bring them out in the community, that's a lot of stuff going on. And I personally don't think we need to do what you were suggested, which is community people interviewing them, or a community forum, which you say is lightly attended. The city council is hiring this person to go to work for this city, work for us. And if they're at all interested, they've done their homework on Wilmer. We saw that the last time we ended up doing this, and I don't. The department head interview thing, I don't know if that's necessary either. And then they should have copies of all this, then, if that's going to take place. I think it's a council decision. We need to do it. Get 1 or 2 finalists, sleep on it, come back the next day, and say, you think about it more on that. You really do. And I suspect there may end up to be 2. It may be, 4 for one, 3 for another, or 5 and 2. And you really got to think hard when that happens. You got to say, let's allow them to come back and make that second presentation. And then there's always questions to ask. There's more. We don't have the last time we didn't get through the 12 or 13 questions that were supposed to be asked. I went back and looked, and there's 4 or 5 of them that were unasked. And that's my thought of the process. Make it simple, If there's a finalist that's everybody agrees to on that same day, and I don't know that'll happen, but I still think you need to sleep on it, talk to them next day, and then the next day you think about bringing them to the community if necessary. But again, I don't think that's necessary. I think once that person's hired, they've done their homework, they'll come to Womer, and they're going to be accepted by these organizations, and people will talk to them then. But you're asking a lot of these people for 2 days. If you're going to do all that, it's some of it's not necessary. I think interview, sleep on it, talk to them the second time, make your decision, and then they can go home and we'll think about an offer.
So why don't you talk through with us a typical day that you would see in the interview process?
Okay, let me give you I actually drew one up today just to give you a sample. And this includes department heads, community panel, tour, lunch, and individual interviews with the full council in a single day. Doesn't mean a decision in a single day. Decision comes later, or you bring them back as is being discussed for day 2. But, for example, with only 3 candidates, it's quite a bit easier to pull off a pretty significant amount of stuff in a single day. For example, you could do a brief department head structured interview and a community panel interview at the same time. So at 9, say you start at 9 o'clock in the morning, that would be done in an hour and a half or 2 hours. The candidates have been each interviewed by this community panel and department head group. All they have is input for you all. If that's not meaningful or of interest to you, as Councilmember Christensen said, that's not something you would need to include. But that could be the morning, starting at 9, ending at 11:30. I'd take those sheets, email them back to my office, get those compiled for you. By the end of the day, you'd have that information in hand, all that input that came from those 2 groups. So that's the morning. Lunch, I like to do a casual lunch with candidates and at least the elected body, but it can involve department heads as well if you want to. Just an opportunity to chat in a unstructured way, no question. I mean, just a very casual lunch. And then, so that would be the lunch. Afternoon is when you would do the full council interviews. And even if those took an hour apiece, you'd have, say 1, 2, 3 o'clock or 1:30 or something like that. You'd be able to get those done in that day. And then come back. If you wanted to select finalists to come back the next day, you could do that. Or if you just wanted to come back the next day and make your decision, you could do that as well. But so that would be kind of a typical day of interviews. And again, with only 3, that's very doable. If you added in the individual interviews with each of you and each candidate, that would not be possible. So,
Yeah, I think we already pulled that off the table.
yeah, I know you did. So, yeah.
I like what I'm hearing. I feel that we need to have that community input. We also need to have more input from the department directors, because the department directors are who they work with every day. And there has to be synergies there too. I'm a little concerned with what I heard you just say, and that would conclude, say, in that 11 o'clock time frame, starting at 9:30, concluding at 11 o'clock. Then go to lunch, start at 1:30. If we could have that information from those community profile and the department directors, then we could look at that when we're doing the interview, and then that can be used as a tool, rather than have that and then that becomes an afterthought. I mean, what we're trying to do is get the community involved in the process and have the community feel like they're adding value. If they don't feel like they're going to add value, you're not going to have people to step up.
We could do that. It takes a little time to put that information together, so that's why I said you'd get it later in the day, because it's going to be raw data. So even if it's a score sheet, that may not be as helpful to you as data that's been assembled for you. Instead of getting, if you get, there's 3 or let's say there's a community panel of 8 people, department head panel of 6 people, 14 different sources of input on 3 candidates is what, 52, individual score sheets that you'd be looking at. My approach with that is to give you all that, but also analyze that data for you, compile it for you, so you have like a one-page summary of what people had to say. So that summary sheet is what takes a couple hours at least to put together. So that's why I had said that information would be a little more challenging. If that's done at 11, I mean, I'd hope to be able to get that to you by 1, but the stars kind of have to align for that to happen.
Well, even if we could have it by the time we finish the
You
last
could for
interview,
sure have it by the end of the day. Absolutely.
or the
Yes.
last interview.
Yes.
Then we can use that when we're doing our final score.
Absolutely, you could. Yes.
And I guess what I was thinking is that the example that you used of the community members and the department directors together jointly doing that, rather than two separate groups, otherwise you're adding another hour to the process.
It's
And
too
you want
big.
them to be-
It's, that's a panel of 15. So I prefer to have it in twos. That's pretty intimidating for somebody to be, sitting at a table with, 15 people or whatever that number would be. So that's why, I can do it that way if you prefer.
Couldn't you say that the department directors pick, everybody can be sitting in the audience, but the department directors pick 2 people to represent them, community members pick 3, you have 5 people that ask the questions, you have 10, 15 questions. Councilmember Nelson.
I like it as he said. You can be running 2 separate, have it set up. So I think you got different issues going on, different questions from department heads versus community. And so if one candidate's in one candidate's in another, then you're only looking at 2 time slots to do that. But I do feel very strongly that the community needs to be allowed. I think our credibility is there too with that. I think we need to listen. We're here because of the community, and we need to listen to that. And I like the panel option, bringing that back with that information.
Councilmember Christensen and Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These 2 groups asking questions, the department heads and the community, are they going to get a sheet of what they can ask and can't ask too then? Because there's some.
I will give them the questions they're going to ask. Yes. Both cases.
Otherwise, we're going down a dangerous road.
No.
And I
Control that.
I would want, how do you choose who the community members? Is
Well,
it-
one of the-
is it a special interest group that's going to be represented? We represent our constituents. We're elected to do that. And my fear is that you get a special interest group that starts to say they're the community, and then they want to go and ask the questions and then ultimately make the decision. I have a fear of that happening, and you probably all understand why.
I think we're getting off topic.
Well, it's whether or not to do these 2 groups and have them ask questions. Again, I go back to the council is hiring this person. This person's going to work for the council, and I think we keep it simple and not put any stress on these people.
Well, they're used to stress if they're at this level. Anderson, followed by Plowman.
What, just as a hypothetical, if you did this panel with community people, directors, what if we ultimately end up saying we don't hire the person that they select as the person that they think is best? Then what have we done to our credibility with the community groups? I think community groups have a place, but I want to include them, but I don't want to offend them if we don't agree with them.
Well, I think generally you're told up front that, the council makes the decision, which is what we've been saying. I think that's what they're told. Councilmember Plowman, followed by Nelson.
Yeah, both Councilman Christensen and Anderson bring up valid points. I think we gotta consider. But I do think, number one, I think that there's probably a fair and logical way that we could go about selecting which community members these would be. I think there's certainly a way we could do that. And number two, I think that yeah, ultimately it is a council decision. However, the one thing that I do really like that we gain from the department head community member panel, we gain this extra perspective that we don't have inside our own brains. there will be other questions there coming from other perspectives aside from our own that we'll get to hear answers to, and we may go, wow, I didn't think to I didn't think to ask that. And hearing their answers to those questions, I think that's super valuable input right there too. And yeah, these individuals, if they're looking at competing for a job of this level, they got to be able to hang in there and handle the stress from it. If they can't, that's not a candidate that gets my vote.
Councilmember Nelson?
I just think this person's going to need to be collaborating with the community. We have the hospital, we have the utilities, we have the county, we have, and how we pick them. I'm open to that. I don't see that as a special interest group. I think they are members of our community that are invested in it, and that we have a responsibility to act for the city. This person is going to work for the city, not just for the city council.
In the school board, when they just hired their person, they had that process. They had it out at Ridgewater College, is where they had it. Councilmember Anderson?
That was kind of what I was going to say. I think we can probably pick 3 non-controversial city people, and I liked your idea of the directors having 2 people ask the questions for them. They can all hear it. They can all provide input. But I think we can come up with 3 non-controversial citizen representatives. We can do that somehow.
Well, I would question why only 3, though. I mean, why not just each of you appoint one? I don't think you're ever going to achieve complete non-controversy with whoever you select. But again, if you put it in the right context, they are giving you input into the process. And I mean, I have not seen this backfire. Any process cannot work the way you want it to, but I think this process can work and can work well if you feel it's important to do. If you collectively don't feel it's important, then let's not do it. But I think the department had input, and I do not recommend selecting 2 people to ask questions. The strategy is that if you have 2 people asking questions, eye contact just goes right at those 2. I like to move it around, have people at a table. So trust me on the details of the process. I'll get that figured out. But as far as what size these panels are, I'd say the whole department head group and a group of 8 citizens. To me, that's the easiest way to go. That way you don't have to talk about who are the 3 we're going to pick and come to an agreement on. You don't have to. You each pick one. So
That works.
Okay. So are we building any consensus here? Are we all in agreement with the department head group doing the interview? Okay, not seeing anything opposed there. Community involvement, community group doing an interview at the same time. Okay, and then each council member will submit a name, and we need those probably to you sooner rather than later.
Yep.
Are we in agreement with that? Councilmember Nelson?
I'm okay with that. I'm just wondering if we can ask for the hospital, utilities, and perhaps the county to be in addition to those. Or,
Then
we're
you
at- now we're
complicate
at
the
11.
process. I'd say if they're important, have them be one of the 8. Again, I think then if you're gonna talk about others, then you better talk about the whole group. That's how I view it.
well, we own the hospital and the utilities.
Yep.
So that was just my question of,
Yep.
they will ultimately be working with this person.
Yep. It's up to you. But again, if you're gonna add to the group, I think you should talk about them all. That's how I would handle it.
Okay, do we have consensus? You have your marching orders? So when do you need the individual names to you?
Well, the sooner the better. I mean, there's a little bit of time, but, one of the things I ran into the last time is one of the names, that my preference would be that you talk to the people first and ask them, get the date. It'd be November, I assume we're talking November 12th, the first day. See if they're available, that sort of thing. But I actually had one in the last time I did this where the person couldn't make it, and there had to be a substitute So the sooner the better. I mean, if you can do it within the next week, that'd be great. Then I can reach out to people, explain to them how it's going to work and that sort of thing. And when they come in for the interviews themselves, I have binders for them. Their questions are there. The sheets are there to rate. Everything is structured without any deviation.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we ought to make sure that they're residents of Wilmer, and maybe they should come from our ward. I mean, if you just pick anybody, you could pick somebody that had a business in Wilmer that doesn't live in Wilmer. I think there should be some parameters here that they live in Wilmer, and maybe they should come from each of our wards. That way there's two from each, well, one from one ward, two from the other, I don't know. Just a suggestion. I'm throwing the idea out there. Shoot the idea now.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So they'll probably come in on the 11th then?
Candidates, yeah.
Yeah. And then if we want them to stay and interview the day after, they might have to stay 2 nights. So we might have to increase the expenses.
I still haven't resolved in my mind that second day interview. So, I mean, I understand the concept of not deciding the first day, but, I mean, are you going to need, after all this takes place, are you going to need to bring, 1 in or 2 in the next day to talk more to them? I mean, I get about not making the decision, but,
Well,
because.
let's face it, some people interview really well the first day, and the next person might be really nervous and then comes in relaxed the second day.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I've heard consistently through this process that we need a 2-step process.
Okay.
So we need to have a 2-step process. I think the second day, I'm sorry, Councilmember Christensen.
I was just going to add that maybe the consensus will be we need 3 more candidates
Right.
Never know.
the first day. So then we don't need the second day interviews. But I think you're right, Mr. Mayor, that the consensus is that the second one is important.
Very important. And I guess the second day is a soft lob. I mean, it's a baseball pitcher throwing a softball, or it's a softball pitcher throwing a baseball, however the analogy you want to use. But it's a soft lob that day. It's not the in-depth interview that is the first day. It's a confirmation. And I'm sure you'll be getting us some really good questions for the second day.
I will, yes. Gladly.
Councilmember Nelson.
So are we going to meet then in the evening or in the late afternoon to come up with so these people know what the
Yeah,
plan is?
I would guess that we would convene after the last interview on where we are on process. So, I mean, that's going to be a full day. I mean, if the council is going to be at everything, I mean, you're probably going to be starting.
Well, you'd start at lunch, basically. You would not.
We would start at lunch for a formal process.
Yep.
Or are you saying the council would not be at all involved in anything prior to that?
Nope, not the way I put it forward.
Okay.
The interviews with the department heads and the community panel, I mean, I'll be facilitating that. You wouldn't see the people until lunch. And then you'd have the afternoon of interviews. So, and you will be, this is a meeting, so you will be already convened.
Correct.
So you would be able to, at the end of that, make your conclusion about bringing people back or whatever. And the way I think that I should handle that is just to tell the candidates to anticipate the 2-day process. And we'll have to, I mean, I have to say that to them because if not, they're going to be in limbo on that second day. So I think and then it goes back to your point that maybe that reimbursement should bump up just a little bit because then you're committing, to 2 days, even though some of them or any of them would even participate that second day.
Sure. Okay, I think we've got process, and I guess the only thing then is do we add an additional kicker then? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a detail, but is somebody going to give these people a tour of our community, or are we going to expect them
I
to?
left that out, sorry. That would be part of the afternoon. Yes, a tour would be involved. Kevin and I have already talked about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, what we would do is have people tour in the afternoon. So if they are interviewing at 1, for example, they're done at 2, somebody could take them on a tour after they're done with that, with their interview, or before they do their interview. So we'd coordinate that and get a tour done, yes. I'm sorry.
And I think it's important that we have the right persons do the tour. You know, we need somebody that's pretty well-versed in our community, and that might be another opportunity to maybe include a citizen going on the tour with, you know, like our economic development director or whoever we pick. But, you know, we might have two people conducting the tour.
I like using staff for tours. There's a lot of free time during a tour when things can get talked about that, just a bias on my part, I like using police chief, economic development director, folks like that, rather than community members participating in that, but that's up. If you prefer to do it that way, we certainly can.
And then my other thought is, so at the end of that day, then they're on their own. We're not doing supper or anything else. They can relax and drive around or do whatever they want to do. Okay.
Yep. Until the next day, if they're one of the people
Right.
coming back. Yep.
I mean, they'll know that evening if they're fine.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd get a hold of them right away after you come to whatever conclusion you come to that evening and let people know that.
Okay, Councilmember Nelson.
From the financial standpoint, can we just say the $300, if they stay for a second day, they get a second $300? No?
I don't think
Just
you
leave it.
can because they won't know if they're finalists or not.
Checkout's at 11, so they'll have to check out. So I'll make a motion to bump it up to 450.
I'll second.
Okay? There's a motion to second to bump it to 450 to take care of an additional net of lodging and food,
Is it not to exceed?
not to exceed with receipts. Yep. Correct? That was your intent? Not to exceed with receipts? Right. And the receipts are submitted to Gary.
Usually, we'll coordinate that. Usually I just have them sent to the city for your approval, so.
And
Councilmember Anderson.
would that follow our normal reimbursement policy, not the amount, but I mean, like alcohol and things like that would probably not be included?
Well, we'd want to see the receipt if they're having alcohol the night before.
Well,
I would follow, my recommendation is that you follow your normal policies. I would hope somebody's not submitting a bill for alcohol as part of their reimbursement, but you never know. It's a good question to ask, and I guess I would say to handle it the way you handle other ones,
I think we should see those receipts.
before you make a decision. Part of the screening process.
Drug test.
Okay, there's a motion been made and seconded. Additional discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion does carry. Thank you for assisting us and walking us through that process. So, Kevin, you understand exactly where we're at. We have the names we have to get. You're going to have to get a place for us to have lunch. You're good at lunch. So, we'll figure that out. The Oaks is always a good place. So, or wherever you choose. Anybody else have anything? You know, last time, the people that did the tours took them around to our ethnic restaurants, but I think we're talking a little more formal process here, so. Right?
Formal last time.
Not for lunch.
We all had all set places to go. The tour was very formalized.
Right.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nelson.
Did the tour last time include the hospital and the utilities?
We drove by them, but we didn't go in.
Okay.
But, and then we all had a separate place we ate. But aren't we looking at lunches with everybody?
Yes,
It's one communal lunch.
right. All of you and the candidates, and the department
And
heads.
the
if you
department
want.
directors.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yep. Yep. That's what
yeah.
it says. That's
Yeah.
what I thought we were doing.
Everybody together,
Everybody together, same room.
yes.
Bunch at the Midwest campus.
What was the
Okay.
question?
Question was, should we have lunch at the Minwest campus? I,
good idea.
I'd say not.
Yeah, I was
Has to be
thinking,
catered and it has to be,
we'll leave that up to our city administrator. Find us a place to have lunch.
I could work, I'll work, I mean, catering isn't necessarily a problem either. I mean, so, but we'll,
There's a buffet at the Oaks, and you can get the room for 30.
is that the golf course?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've been there. Okay.
Okay. So as council members, we have to be thinking of the candidate or the person that we're going to recommend to sit on that panel. And then we should ask them prior to getting the name to Gary so that when he makes contact, that they're not surprised.
Yeah.
And let's try to have that done by Thursday of this week to you.
Okay.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question regarding that, are these people going to be, are their questions going to be vetted? Or
Yeah.
are you going, like, where does the question derive?
I'm giving them to them. I will draft all the questions, both for the department head group and the community panel.
Okay, so they're,
They're just asking them and then rating responses.
okay, all right.
And I mean, the questions for the community panel are geared toward the community, but
But they're not coming from these individuals? The questions aren't
no.
coming from?
No. That may work, but
No.
likely it wouldn't. So no, I just
think we
say,
can run into
here,
more of the
yeah,
problem you
here's
were
the
talking about.
questions. You ask these questions. And I mean, I think the questions are workable. There's always going to be criticism of that going, well, we should
Mm-hmm.
have asked this or that, but I think they'll be a good fit.
Councilmember Christensen,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What time should we tell these individuals that they got to be available? I mean,
9:30, right?
Yeah, something like that. I'm gonna really work hard in the next day or two to get an actual calendar constructed based on this conversation. So I would say after 9. How about?
after 9.
Yeah, and they'll be done by noon.
We're talking about the forum, the community forum. people.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, when are we doing the interviews then?
afternoon.
Afternoon, okay, I didn't
Yep.
get that. And then just another answer to Andrew's question. There are legal questions when you're hiring people. You can't ask some of these.
Well, that's why I asked
Yeah.
if they be vetted,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Okay,
but if it's not involved.
yeah.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, procedural question, so that we look professional. What would be the appropriate attire for the council, so that we all kind of look the same? And then somebody isn't going to come in jeans and a sweatshirt and, what should we look like?
I never tell elected bodies how they should dress. So, I mean, these people are going to be dressed well, who are interviewing. So, you all look good tonight. So I'd say like this. You look exceptional tonight, I would say.
You're smooth.
So, yeah, I guess, I wouldn't say, it's not real, this isn't a real casual thing, so.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what. that was
Business
my
professional.
point.
Yep,
That was my point,
yep.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe you walked us down the slippery slope we're climbing. So Councilmember Fagerly.
One other question. The people that are on the panel, we don't promise them lunch? It'll just be coffee and donuts and cookies, maybe?
Correct. Yeah, no, they won't be involved in the lunch.
Okay.
Correct?
You
That's
could
where I
invite
was.
them if you wanted, but, I mean,
Oh, that's going to get too big, though.
it will be big.
It's way
Yeah.
too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already at,
My only another question. We have a citizen.
Kevin.
Candidate not.
Kevin.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm just questioning the council's prerogative on the unofficial candidate that we would have chosen by that time. Should we include them? The election's the 10th, the interview's the 12th.
Oh, that person.
Swearing-in ceremony would be the 19th.
Yes, they should be included.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Can they vote, though?
No, they can't vote. They can't vote.
Right.
No, they can't vote because they haven't been
Right, they haven't been.
to the board canvas yet. Correct? They can't vote, can they?
That's correct. They can't vote until after they're sworn into office.
Correct, right.
And really, they can attend. They really shouldn't be, sitting at the dais, I would say. Certainly, I think you can invite them and include them, whoever happens to be the successful candidate, but they aren't on the council yet at that point.
But they could be invited to the lunch or not?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
So they can be at the lunch and then at the interviews, but they should sit in the audience for the interview.
I believe so, yes.
That's what I would recommend. They can still fully, participate that way. Or
You all
are we,
okay with
are
that?
you going to do the interviews in this room?
Yes.
Okay, so they could be sitting over here or something, too.
Or you can do them at City Hall. Where are you going to do them?
Was at City Hall last time, if I recalled, not recorded.
More
You should
comfortable.
direct me. You're comfortable there.
Where?
City Hall.
City Hall.
Upstairs?
They're both well.
One thing I typically include in the city council interview is a brief, to start the interview, a brief, like a 10-minute presentation that each council or each candidate makes. I give them an assignment the week before. Here is your assignment. Come in with a presentation on this subject. Be ready to do it. 10 minutes is all you have. So wherever you do that, I would suggest that the technology needs to be there to be able to do a PowerPoint. If that, so wherever you do that. Is that available in?
PowerPoints.
But I mean,
Okay, so,
you can't see that screen there. I mean, I'll yield to the council, but why wouldn't we do it here? We have a nice ability to show the PowerPoint. We can have, if the public wants to be here. Last time we only had a few people of the public that was there, but I have a feeling we may have more this time around.
Let's do it here.
Councilmember Christensen?
It's much more comfortable at City Hall, sitting around a nice table. It's cozy, the ceiling is low. It's just more comfortable. And the person who we're interviewing is no more than, 8 feet away from any one person. Where are they going to be? Standing there? And, I mean, that's uncomfortable. I just soon sit down next to them and talk to them and see how they react. And this is an uncomfortable room for people standing there talking to anybody up here. It is. Just ask the people that stand there. It isn't, if we had a round table in the middle, we sat around it, that would be great. But I mean, it's just, the atmosphere over there is better. It's at City Hall. That's where they're going to end up working, whoever's over there. And your office is there. If we need something to grab, whatever it is, it's comfortable. That's why I think it should be over there.
Councilmember Nelson, followed by Anderson.
I just think we need to be prepared if there's 20 people from this community that walk in and want to be there. We should be able to accommodate them. And I don't find this room so intimidating. So
Councilmember Anderson.
My question is of staff, can they do PowerPoint reliably at City Hall? Because I tend to agree with Councilmember Christensen that it's a little more intimate feeling there, but we have to make sure that the equipment is spot on.
I believe that it is, sir, and IT will be standing by. So, but it's your call. And we would have, just to clarify, a table like that with the microphone right up front, not standing for an hour and 10 minutes at the podium.
Okay.
That'd be a lot to ask of a candidate
or a consultant.
who's reaching at an hour and 10 minutes now.
Mayor Calvin, is there more room upstairs than downstairs at City Hall?
They're both about the same size, but that's one thing that I wonder if it would be better to do it upstairs. That screen is a little better located. Is it still in the same spot where it's on that wall?
Yes, sir.
That screen is a little better to see upstairs than it is downstairs.
It's almost identical with the length of the table, depending on how you're sitting. They're almost identical setups, but we can work.
Okay? Councilmember Nelson.
In the past, have staff attended the interviews?
It's been up to staff if they attend or not. I attended the interviews last time.
I'm just concerned if we're setting ourselves up for space.
I think we'll deal with that for what I'm hearing. You have your marching orders, your knees are getting tired.
I'm actually doing fine. I could stay here another hour, 2 hours if you want me to.
No.
I didn't think so.
Okay, so I think that does it through the steps that we're at. We have 10 minutes if we want to talk contract at all. I don't believe that that's sufficient time to talk contract. So you were all sent a sample contract, just so that you could have an opportunity to review it. We attempted to strike anything that talked specifics. The part on vehicle allowance was left as a dollar amount. That was not intentional. That is not what is being recommended. That number just was not vetted out. So, so I guess with that being said, we would, do we say we're going into recess or do we adjourn?
It's almost an equal. It wouldn't matter. Same body, we'll start right up at 7.
Mr. Mayor, I'd recommend you adjourn. This is a separately noticed special meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, we're adjourned.
And you want all of these?
I do. Yes. All these got to be turned back in.